A rough day for Bitcoin bulls as the SEC denied approval for yet another Bitcoin-backed ETF. For all the details, let's get to Bob Pisani at the NYSE. Bob.
Hi, Melissa. The last Bitcoin ETF still standing has bit the dust. Last night, the SEC rejected the application for a Bitcoin ETF from Bitwise Asset Management on grounds that are pretty familiar by now, that the proposal doesn't meet standards that would prevent fraud and manipulation. This is a theme the SEC has sounded several times in the last 2 years. Van Eck, which had a similar proposal for a Bitcoin ETF, they withdrew their version last month. So there's two main issues the SEC has cited over and over about this. First is custody, where firms hold Bitcoin on behalf of clients, and where there's been reports of thefts and break-ins into Bitcoin accounts that have been very widespread. That's a problem. And the second issue is regulation of the exchanges that set the prices for Bitcoin. The SEC has asserted that most of these exchanges are outside the United States and are subject to fraud and manipulation. Okay, so where are we? Is Bitcoin dead? Is the Bitcoin ETF dead? Certainly for this year, but Bitwise's Matt Hogan made it very clear that additional filings would be forthcoming to address the SEC's concerns. He said, "We're pleased with the progress that the industry has made and believe that with additional research and continued progress in the broader ecosystem, the remaining concerns and challenges raised in this order will ultimately be satisfied." Finally, on a separate but related issue, the CFTC said several years ago that Bitcoin is a commodity and therefore it's under its jurisdiction. Now the CFTC chairman, Heath Tarbert, has said Ether, which is the world's second biggest cryptocurrency by market capitalization, is also a commodity as well. Back to you, Melissa.
All right, Bob. Thank you, Bob Pisani. So a little bad news, good news for the crypto community.
Yeah, I mean, so on the ETF, this used to be a lot more important. The problem the SEC has is that a huge portion of the Bitcoin trading is done outside the U.S. And so they're concerned that they don't have the view into those markets. That being said, there's been some developments. You have companies like Fidelity and TD Ameritrade starting to push into this space. So ultimately, you're going to be able to buy Bitcoin in a regular brokerage account, or it's going to look like a regular brokerage account. So I'm less concerned that you need a Bitcoin ETF at this point in time. Actually, I think the second part of what Bob said, the CFTC saying that Ethereum is a commodity, is huge for the space. It gives us regulatory clarity. The CFTC has now said, listen, if you're buying Bitcoin or these smart contract platforms, they are commodities. That opens the door for institutions to come in. The biggest thing when I sit in meetings, everybody's concerned. What if they ban it? What if they ban it? Well, you know what? The CFTC said, we're not banning it. We're going to regulate it. And now investors can say, put it in my commodity bucket. So now Ethereum, Bitcoin, and all the other smart contract platforms become the commodity for the digital economy. And I think that's huge. I think the market's missing that.
Could you also now have Ethereum futures?
And that is what the CFTC said, is Ethereum futures are next.
Wasn't that bad for Bitcoin?
I mean, I don't know. There was a lot of things going on with Bitcoin at the time, so it's kind of hard to isolate whether or not that was bad for Bitcoin. I think in this day and age, if they were to come out now, and Bitcoin's at 20,000, right? Mm-hmm. When futures came out for Bitcoin. In this day and age, I actually think it's a positive for Ethereum, because the other thing we're seeing is a lot of macro funds starting to buy into the space. So they like to buy futures. We saw today a new product come out that's gold versus Bitcoin. That is actually pretty interesting, too. That's demand from macro funds. I talked to the people who did that. They're telling me macro funds want to trade Bitcoin as digital gold. So you're starting to see it. It's a lot slower than we all thought. That quote-unquote herd that was trampling, it's kind of tiptoeing, but it's actually happening.